dangerous thing. Recording in progress. Let me start again.
Oh.
I'm very pleased to be here this evening to talk to you about what is on your November ballot and how dangerous some of these measures are for taxpayers. The worst thing on the ballot for taxpayers this year, and in a number of years, in a long time, is Proposition 5. Proposition 5 makes it easier to raise taxes. That's what it does. You're going to hear a lot of things from the people who support it and are the proponents of it, saying it's going to solve all the problems there are in the world. But actually, what it does is make it easier to raise taxes. It changes the vote threshold for passing local bonds, which are debt. Local bonds are how local governments borrow money, and then they have to pay it back plus interest ahead of all the current needs in the budget for decades. That's what a bond is. And by making it easier to pass local bonds, they are making it easier to raise property taxes because local bonds are paid for on property tax bills. And who pays property tax bills? Well, homeowners, of course, but not just homeowners, because property taxes are also raised on apartment buildings. That means higher rents for tenants. They are also raised on commercial property. That means every little business that's in a strip mall and every big business like a Walmart or a big box store like that, they get a higher property tax bill also, and that is passed through as higher prices. So when you raise property taxes, it raises the cost of housing, it raises the cost of living, and California already has the highest poverty rate in the nation when the cost of living is taken into account. So we have to take this very seriously. Making it easier.
Doesn't matter. I can't hear it.
Making it can everybody hear me? Thumbs up, you can hear me?
Yes.
Okay. What Proposition 5 does is drop the threshold for passing bonds from the current 2/3 down to 55%. And let me tell you how long we've had that 2/3 voter protection, taxpayer protection in the California Constitution. I bet you think it goes back to 1978 with Prop 13. Guess again. It goes back to 1879. That's when they first put into the 1879 Constitution the protection that local governments, local school districts, local entities of any kind cannot take on debt unless it is approved by 2/3 of the local electorate, all the eligible voters who vote, 2/3 of them, to take on local debt. And it actually originated even earlier than that. It originated in 1849. In the gold rush era, California's very first constitution, which was handwritten on parchment, and you can still see it in the archives of the Secretary of State. It's online. The handwritten constitution says the legislature is directed to restrict the ability of local governments to take on debt in order to prevent abuses. Abuses. They knew in 1849 that local politicians would want to borrow money, and it goes on the property tax bills to pay it back. And you want to prevent abuses. So in 1879, they formalized that into the 2/3 vote requirement, and there it stood all the way till now, with one exception. In 2000, the voters were persuaded to make it easier to pass school bonds. So school bonds pass with 55%. And boy, did that make every other government entity jealous. Now they want it for everything. And that's what Proposition 5 does. It drops that threshold from 2/3 to 55% for nearly everything. It's for infrastructure, which is everything, and for public housing projects and programs, even things like down payment assistance, which are not something that's going to still be there in 30 years. That's a cash payment, and you're going to put it on the credit card, and you're going to be paying it off for 30 or 40 years in the local budgets. And every budget, they have to pay the principal and interest on the old bonds before they pay for current needs. So if they're not fixing the sidewalks, if they're not picking up the trash, it may be because they're paying too much in principal and interest for old debt, and the taxpayers are not getting anything for their tax money that they're paying, except a lot of debt that they're stuck paying off. This is why these are the abuses that you want to avoid. So Prop 5 enables all these abuses by making it easier to pass bonds at the local level. And once again, infrastructure. Every election, a different entity will be putting one of these bonds on the ballot. One year it'll be libraries, one year it'll be fire departments, maybe both at the same time. It might be water projects. It could be transit agencies. Even regional associations of governments can put bonds on the ballot and pass them with 55%. This is very troubling because there are a lot of laws on the books in California that require various things for climate change and different kinds of bike paths and walkways and things that supposedly will prevent climate change. And these governments are required to do some of this stuff and they don't have the money. So they will put bonds on the ballot and then you'll get the increase on property tax bills after every election. A couple of years of that, people are going to start losing their houses. So Prop 5 makes it easier to raise taxes. It is a turbo engine for raising taxes in California on property owners and then everybody else that gets past those costs. It has to be stopped. If we don't stop it, people are going to start losing their houses. It gets around Proposition 13 because this is voter-approved debt. And what they're doing is they're making it easier for fewer voters to approve it. No on 5. And let me urge you, while I have you here, because you're all activists, don't worry about voter fraud with your mail ballot. Your mail ballot is not going to be tampered with. I have never seen that, and I've looked. What I've seen is more ballots coming into the trays from unknown locations. That's where the fraud is. Too many ballots coming in after Election Day, too many ballots coming in from groups you don't know where they are. They're being dumped in drop boxes. There's no chain of custody. Don't discourage people from voting by mail. In fact, reach out to your whole mailing list and tell all the people who are going to get a ballot on October 7th who didn't really want one, but they went to the DMV and now they're going to get a ballot. Tell them what's on the ballot. Tell them it's coming October 7th and they can vote no on 5 because 5 makes it easier to raise taxes. And whatever else you want to tell them to vote for or against, fine, great, but tell them in September. Tell them in September so that when the ballot comes and they look at it, instead of saying, I don't know what any of this is, they'll say, I know exactly what this is, and I'm voting this, and this, and mailing it in immediately. If we can mobilize the low propensity voters who went to the DMV, we can win. We can win anything in California if we get those people informed in September about the ballot that's coming in October. I think a lot of people wait too long to start talking about the election. It's great to talk about it in September because so much of the voting is going to happen the first week of October. We're not all adjusted to that. You know, we think Election Day is November 5th, and it is, but it's really a month of voting and a month of counting. We have a lot to do here. There's a lot to watch out for, but we can overwhelm the fraud if we turn out. We can't discourage Republicans from voting. We have to turn out, and we have to get all those low propensity voters informed. No on 5. Radio commercials start statewide from Howard Jarvis on Monday, and you'll hear them all up and down the state. So watch for that. The next thing I want to talk to you about is Proposition 2 and Proposition 4. Each of these are $10 billion bond measures, one for school facilities, one for climate programs. For context, California already has $79 billion in outstanding debt and another $30 billion that's authorized but not yet issued. And then we put $6 billion on top of that in March by passing Prop 1, $6.38 billion to be exact. So there's already a lot of debt. In February, the Legislative Analyst's Office said that we are currently paying almost $8 billion a year in principal and interest for our existing debt. So that's $8 billion that the legislature doesn't have because they're paying off old debt. So every time you hear that they're cutting a program or they don't have money to do something important, remember that $8 billion right off the top is going to pay old debt. So now here come 2 new proposals, $10 billion each. That's a lot. Together, they're almost $1 billion a year out of the budget every year for the next 35 or 40 years. They total, I think the estimate is $900 billion for the two of them. Now, what are they for? Proposition 4 is for climate programs. There are a couple of things in there for clean water, which are very important and should have been funded in the budget without interest payments being attached to them. But instead, they pulled that out and they said, well, this will look good on the ballot label. Who doesn't like clean water? And so then they started loading it up with Christmas tree ornaments. And there's all kinds of stuff. One of my personal favorites, $80 million for the LA River Project. I don't know if you're familiar with the LA River Project. We have the LA River encased in concrete channels because in the 1920s, it used to flood and kill people. And the Army Corps of Engineers came in, I think in the 1930s or 40s, after a couple of really deadly floods. And they put the river in concrete channels, and the city has not had a deadly flood since. So, of course, our current government wants to jackhammer the concrete and make it natural so that it looks like waterfront property for all the real estate developers. It's a $1 billion project. It's a stupid idea, and it's a $1 billion project. And they have no money for it in Los Angeles. And the federal government has declined to help with this project. The Army Corps of Engineers doesn't even want to go near it. They're the ones that built the thing. They don't want to jackhammer the concrete. So why does this bond measure, Prop 4, have $80 million in it for the LA River Project, which is going on the credit card with interest for 35 or 40 years? Maybe they needed votes from somebody in Los Angeles in order to get this on the ballot. They needed a 2/3 vote to get it on the ballot. It's a stupid expenditure. It's totally wasteful. The thing is filled with stuff like that. There's $475 million for wind projects. There are no offshore wind projects as described in this measure. There's no project. There's no approval for a project. It would be in international waters. It needs federal approval. We don't have that. Why are we putting this on the credit card? $475 million with interest payments. This is like the bullet train. All they're going to do is pay consultants to tell us how far behind schedule it is. Wasteful spending. $10 billion, probably $18 billion with interest. Why are we doing this? No on Prop 4. It's a lot of programs. It's a lot of grants. Once you make the grants, there's no accountability for how the grant recipient spends that money. That's where you can get all the fraud. Yes, there will be audits and oversight. They'll say, well, was the money used to make grants? Yes, it was. Everybody passes the audit. Congratulations. What happened to the money once it went to the grant recipient? Oh, that's not our job. That's outside the scope of our audit. It's a terrible proposition. Proposition 4 is $10 billion that should not be on your ballot. It's just more spending. A lot of these programs were actually cut from the budget because they weren't a priority. And so the activists went and put them in a bond measure. No, on Prop 4. Prop 2 could end up raising your local property taxes. So you should be aware of this. This is $10 billion for school facilities. The grants are awarded first come, first serve. And only to districts that agree to do a local match of the money of up to 50%. So what happens here is the wealthier school districts can pay consultants and attorneys, and they can get their application in, and they can put a bond on the ballot for the matching funds. And a high income district where the property is valuable, maybe they'll pass it. And so there'll be a new performing arts center or something nice in this district. Well, what about the districts that have lead in the water, leaky roofs? They're not, the seismic safety standards have not been met. They have crumbling this and crumbling that, and they don't have laboratory facilities for the science classes. What do they get? They get nothing. Why do they get nothing? Because this system is set up to make sure they get nothing. And then you get a ballot in the mail that says, well, we need more debt because there's asbestos in the walls and lead in the water. Let me tell you something. Since 1998, California voters have approved $54 billion in K through 12 bonds. If there's still asbestos in the walls and lead in the water, who's going to prison for it? Where's the accountability for all these previous state bonds? Some of the money hasn't even been spent yet. Why is there lead in the water in the Oakland schools? As a reporter told me there is. Why is that happening? Why has that not been dealt with? Politics? Maybe there's no glamour to awarding a contract to fix pipes. I don't know. Maybe they want to have something big they can take a picture of, put on their campaign brochure. I paid for this with tax money. I secured the funds for this. Is that the reason? It's a broken system. So say no. Among other things, if your district is going to get local funds, they have to do a local match. If it's going to get bond funds from the state, they have to do a local match. Your property taxes will go up as a result. This is not well thought out. It's not fair. It doesn't deal with the priorities. The accountability is not adequate. No on Prop 2, no on Prop 4, too much debt. They have to stop the spending, and they have to get the priorities right in our record-breaking budget. We have enough money in California, they're just wasting it. And by the way, we're in a budget emergency and we're digging into the reserves because they won't stop spending. And that's a problem. That's a bigger problem than just these two measures. Proposition 3. According to the legislative analyst, Proposition 3 does not change the law in California at all. What it does is it takes language that's in the Constitution out that says marriage is between a man and a woman. That would be out. Instead, you get the Supreme Court's language about a right to marry. According to the legislative analyst, this doesn't change the law in California at all. The Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association has taken no position on Prop 3 because we've been told it doesn't change the law. So we've taken no position. So that's 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now 6. 6 is interesting. This is part of the reparations agenda. This says it shall be unlawful to have indentured servitude anywhere in California. This bans indentured servitude. What this really bans is mandatory prison labor. It bans prison facilities from requiring inmates to have jobs and work. Usually they work in the prisons on things that help to run the prisons. According to the legislative analyst, about a third of state prisoners have jobs working in the prisons, keeping them going. If Prop 6 passes, they can't be required to do those jobs as part of their sentence. Well, that means that either they'll have to be paid more to incentivize them to take the jobs, or someone will have to be brought in from the outside to contract labor to come in and do the jobs. Either way, that's going to wind up costing the taxpayers more money. And we just don't think that's fair to the taxpayers. We don't see anything so terrible about requiring people who are serving a sentence for committing crimes in a state prison to do work. We don't see anything so terrible about that. Obviously, you want the prisons to be well run and you don't want people to be abused, and there's no evidence that they have been. So we are a no on 6. We think it's expensive and unfair to the taxpayers to do that. We have to work to pay these taxes, so we don't think it's right that prisoners could have a pass on that. Okay, now we jump from Proposition 6 to Proposition 32. Why do we jump? Because if the legislature was a casino, it would be shut down by the Gaming Commission. It's tilting the roulette wheel so that it can always win. They wanted the measures they put on the ballot at the top of the ballot. So 2 through 6, the legislature put on the ballot, and 32 through 36, citizens put on the ballot with signatures. So they manipulated the order of the ballot to try and favor themselves. Don't be fooled. Prop 32 is a citizen's initiative to raise the minimum wage. At Howard Jarvis, we're against that. We think that raising the minimum wage does not create the revenue to pay the minimum wage. So instead, it results in people's hours being cut, and it's very hard on small businesses. And it also increases the cost of the state budget because the state of California pays a lot of people to do work at the minimum wage, home health care work, things like that. And that raises the costs for taxpayers. So we're against Prop 32. It would raise the minimum wage from $16 to $18. As you know, we already have something higher than that for fast food workers, and there are some local ordinances for hotel workers near airports where it's higher. But this would be a statewide measure. We are no on 32. 33 is very important, rent control. 33 is the third try to create the ability of cities to pass radical rent control that will put property owners in the rental housing business out of business. Here's what it does. it would repeal the Costa-Hawkins Rental Housing Act of 1995, I think it is, from the 1990s. And what Costa-Hawkins says is you can't have rent control on single-family homes or individual condo and townhouse units, and you can't have vacancy control, meaning when a tenant moves out under Costa-Hawkins, the landlord can reset the rate to market value for the next tenant. Under vacancy control, the cities would be able to hold that rent under the same rent control rate even after a tenant moved out. So the new tenant would get the rent controlled rate. They would be able to pass an ordinance that did that. That is just death to the economics of the rental housing business. If cities can pass radical rent control of any kind and all the limits are off, who is going to invest in rental property? Who's going to make a loan for a developer who wants to build apartment buildings, let's say in Berkeley, if there's somebody out there on the campaign trail saying, I favor this rent control ordinance, which has this, this, and this, and a lender looks at that and says, 2 elections from now, that person could be in the position to do this in Berkeley. And then what happens to our investment with our 30-year loan for this apartment building? It's going to be in foreclosure. We're not going to get our money out of it because radical rent control changes the economics of the rental housing business. So rent control reduces the supply of housing. And no coincidence, we've been doing rent control of one kind or another since the late 1970s in California, and it has reduced the number of affordable rent-controlled units because people withdraw them from the market, they sell the building, they get out of the business. You can't make people stand still and lose money every month just because you want to, although they tried. There was a case in Santa Monica where a court actually ruled that a landlord could not go out of business. Somebody inherited a building. He was losing money every month. He said, I'm going to evict the tenants and get out of the business. And a court said, you can't because we need the housing. And he's like, what do you mean we? And that was the ruling. So the result of that was a law called the Ellis Act, which simply said, yes, property owners in the rental housing business do have the right to go out of business. And there are people in the radical rent control community who want to repeal the Ellis Act to try and make landlords forcibly lose money. This is senseless. When you have a housing shortage, you need incentives to build more housing. You don't need penalties for building more housing. So Prop 33 is a disaster. No on Prop 33. Absolutely no. This is brought to us by the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. This is their 3rd try. And that brings us to Prop 34. You could call this the landlord's revenge. Prop 34 goes after the AIDS Healthcare Foundation by saying that organizations that make money from the federal drug discount program, which AHF does, must use the money for their core mission, and they can't use the money for politics on other subjects. And so Prop 34, if it passes, would stop nonprofits from making money on federal drug discount programs like that and using that money to meddle in politics on completely unrelated subjects. They would lose their nonprofit status if they did that. So at Howard Jarvis, we think that that's well earned. And so no on 33 and yes on 34 to put a stop to manipulation with your tax dollars one way or another. I think the money actually comes from pharmaceutical companies, but the pharmaceutical companies are paid by Medicare and Medicaid. So one way or another, it's your money. Proposition 35. Now, Howard Jarvis has taken no position on this, and I'll tell you why. There is a managed care organization tax in California on HMOs like Anthem Blue Cross. We are against this tax, but what they've done, it's a temporary tax. It's going to expire. We are told in the legislature it's likely to be renewed permanently. Currently, the money goes into the general fund, and it helps offset the deficit from all the excessive spending that they're doing. We don't think that's right. We don't think it's right to make healthcare more expensive, health insurance more expensive, to offset reckless spending in the legislature. But that's the current situation. So what's Prop 35? This comes to us from the healthcare providers, and they say what we should do is make this tax permanent and direct the revenue to the healthcare providers who treat Medi-Cal patients. Now, the reason for that is that California has extremely low reimbursements for doctors and facilities that treat Medi-Cal patients. How many people are on Medi-Cal? The safety net program for low-income Californians. This is full health insurance for low-income Californians. 14 million people. 14 million people, 1/3 of the state, falls into the category of low income needing the safety net health insurance program. And there are not enough doctors. And that's because the reimbursements are so low. So you have a situation where people have long waits. Yes, they have insurance, but they can't get care. And that's terrible. So how do we fix this? I think they should fix it in the regular budget. They should admit how much Medi-Cal costs in California. They should stop expanding it to illegal immigrants, which is what they have done, not for emergency care like other states do, but for full scope insurance, full scope Medi-Cal. Everyone who's in the state of California illegally is entitled, it's an entitlement program. They're entitled to full scope Medicare, Medi-Cal rather, and then whatever they need, they get. And how much is that going to cost? No one has any idea. It's an entitlement. Everyone can have it. Everyone can use it. No limit. And not enough doctors. So Proposition 35 aims to address some of that. It aims to direct this tax increase to the Medi-Cal providers. We're not taking a position, as I said, because we don't like the tax. But if they're going to have the tax, it's probably better to give it to the healthcare providers than to Gavin Newsom and the general fund. Well, that's Proposition 35. Proposition 36, you probably already know about this. This is the fix to Proposition 47 from 2014, which essentially decriminalized multiple repeat offenses of shoplifting, drug use, various things like that. Prop 47 is widely blamed for the surge in retail theft, for the fact that the toothpaste is locked up at CVS, for the drug use that we see on the streets, for the homelessness and the petty theft that's caused by the drug use. Prop 47 gets a lot of blame from a lot of people. What this does, it comes to us from district attorneys, and Prop 36 makes changes to Prop 47 so that on the third offense, consequences can be more serious. And also, these misdemeanor offenses can be aggregated. So if someone's going up and down the street, hitting 5 different stores in a day, every day for a week, and putting together this huge cache of stolen goods and selling it on some online service, all of that is easier to prosecute. It's easier to prosecute aggregated misdemeanors. And it makes it also, there's an opportunity for what they call treatment mandated felonies, where people can be directed into drug addiction or mental health treatment, and then they can have their record expunged so that they can make a fresh start. And the idea is not to put more people in prison, although it does allow judges the latitude to sentence people to prison under the right circumstances. The idea of it is not to put more people in prison and increase the population of incarcerated people in California. The point of it is to have consequences that deter crime and that make it easier to get people into treatment, because under Prop 47, the leverage went away to have court-ordered treatment, which will save lives, no question about it. So that's your ballot. Prop 36 is the last thing on it. We have some local measures. If you are in Los Angeles County, watch out for Measure A, which is a sales tax increase for the homeless industrial complex. It would double the Measure H tax, which is set to expire in 2027. It would double it and make it permanent. This is a so-called citizens initiative tax increase under a court-created loophole. It doesn't need a 2/3 vote. It passes with a simple majority if it's, quote, written by citizens. Well, it actually was written by the people who are going to get the money, like United Way, which pays its CEO, hang on to something, in 2022, the CEO of United Way of Greater Los Angeles made $746,000. You want to double the revenue stream to the people who are feasting on your tax money? PATH, people assisting the homeless, CEO makes something north of $300,000. Also the same for Habitat for Humanity of Greater Los Angeles, north of $300,000. and many, many salaries in the six figures below that, that's where your money's going, to these big nonprofit organizations, non-governmental organizations. They take these contracts. There's no accountability for how they spend the money. There's an audit going on in Los Angeles to see where the money went since 2020. Nobody knows. The auditor said it's like untangling spaghetti, and they can't even get the records from these agencies that are supposed to be overseeing it. It's corrupt. So Measure A is a big no from us. Measure E, also in Los Angeles County, is a parcel tax for the fire department, the county fire department, another one of these loophole taxes from a citizens initiative. Guess who the citizens are? The firefighters union. Guess what the measure requires? More hiring of people for the county fire department. They want 4 on a fire truck instead of 3. Okay, no on that. That's $60 per 1,000 square feet of your home. And honestly, the ballot argument says, if you don't vote for this, everybody's going to die. Vote like your life depends on it. But truly, Los Angeles County has a $45 billion budget. $45 billion. This raises $150 million a year from property owners. If they can't find $150 million in the county budget for life-saving equipment, everybody should be recalled. What is going on with these governments and these people trying to raise your taxes with citizens initiatives? No on all of that. And I'm also recommending a no on Measure US, which is the LAUSD bond. Don't even ask. $9 billion. They shoved it onto the ballot in 24 hours. Up and down the ballot, you're going to be seeing bonds, and you're going to be seeing these upland loophole taxes. Upland, because that was the name of the court decision that created the loophole. You're going to see these citizen initiative tax increases that wind up passing with a simple majority. And on the bonds, many of these bonds say they need a 2/3 vote, but if Proposition 5 passes on the same ballot, they would all pass with 55%. A little bit of a trick on the voters there, kind of a retroactive instant tax increase. Vote no on 5. I think you have to vote no on most, if not all, of the bond measures, and certainly watch out for those citizen initiative tax increases. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions.
Let me see what's in the chat so far. Okay. So the first question is, so is Prop 36 a yes or a no?
Oh, I thought I said that. Prop 36 is a yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yes, it's a very thoughtful measure. It will fix the problems in Prop 47. Yes on 36.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the next one is Prop 4 includes specified accountability requirements. Is this the ask if the grant was given and received you were referring to?
Yes, exactly. The bond oversight can only look at whether the money was given as the bond requires. So where the bond requires grants to these non-governmental organizations or businesses or local government agencies, once the grant is given, that's it. They've met their obligation. And then how the money is spent, there's no accountability.
Right. Okay. Okay. The next one is regarding Proposition 6. What would the compensation be? I read 50% of minimum wage and also 100% of minimum wage.
It's uncertain. It's not specified. But what it does is it creates the conditions for a negotiation. And you have to wonder if you'd have labor unions come in and say, well, we're going to represent these prisoners in this labor negotiation. We don't really know. But it creates the conditions for negotiating higher wages because it says that the prisoners can't be required to work. So it's going to cost something, that we know.
Okay. Why is majority allowed now? It wasn't done in the past.
Majority on what?
I'm not sure. That was the question. So whoever asked that question, if you want to elaborate a little bit, we'll answer that. We'll go to the next one. How is it that it's easy to get rid of 2/3 vote on any vote?
Well, it wasn't all that easy. This is something that Assemblywoman Cecilia Aguiar Curry has tried to do for a number of years. It was always defeated. She never had the votes to get it on the ballot. These measures, these constitutional amendments, take a 2/3 vote in each house of the legislature. But once on the ballot, they only need a simple majority to pass. So in order to get the votes, which she couldn't year after year, she added affordable housing to it. And then when it wasn't polling very well, it originally applied not only to bonds, but to special taxes. So the special taxes, which under Prop 13 need a 2/3 vote, they would pass with just 55%. That was polling very badly. And so they
Looks like she froze up.
am I frozen? Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. It was polling very badly, and at the last minute, the legislature passed ACA 10, which amended ACA 1, which is what became Prop 5. They took out the part that made it easier to pass special taxes, and they just left the part that made it easier to take on more debt by passing bonds. So it's not so easy to do it. And I saw the PPIC poll that just came out, and it's pretty much underwater. It's narrowly losing among voters. And our radio commercials start on Monday and run through Election Day. So I hope that we convince a lot of people that this is not some benefit to them. This is just making it easier to raise their taxes.
Okay, so on that other question, the person came back, I think you might have answered this. Why is majority allowed now? It wasn't done in the past. And then she came like Prop 5 or on any other new proposition.
Well, two different things to look at. One is how you pass these constitutional amendments. So a constitutional amendment takes a 2/3 vote in each house of the legislature. And then once it's on the ballot, it only needs a simple majority of the electorate. So that's where the majority part comes in. As far as the vote threshold to pass bonds and taxes, that was 2/3 from the Constitution of 1879.
Mhm.
And on special that for bonds, and on special taxes, it was a 2/3 vote from Prop 13 in 1978. And if you're not familiar with Prop 13, let me just tell you quickly that it capped how much your property taxes can go up every year while you own your property. It used to be the case that property was taxed at the market value, and the tax rate was average statewide 2.67%. So hang on to something, and if you have a pacemaker, don't listen. But imagine paying 2.67% of the current market value of your house every year in property taxes as a condition of keeping it. Because if you don't pay the property taxes, the county will sell your house. So that's what it used to be. And Prop 13 put a cap on that and said, as long as you own your property, your assessed value can only go up maximum 2% a year with inflation, not more than 2, no matter what the market value is. And it cut the tax rate from the statewide average 2.67% down to 1%, which was a tremendous tax cut and really helped people. And then it put in these 2/3 requirements to make it harder to raise other taxes, knowing that they would certainly try. So statewide taxes, because of Prop 13, need a 2/3 vote in the legislature, each house of the legislature, and then the governor's signature. And statewide taxes can only go up that way. They can't go up with a simple majority vote of the legislature. They need 2/3. That's Prop 13. And locally, taxes that never had to go on the ballot at all now have to go on the ballot. And the way it's come down after court decisions interpreting it, general fund taxes only need a simple majority to pass of the electorate, but taxes for a special purpose, where they tell you they're going to spend it on something, that needs a 2/3 vote. And the courts have been chopping loopholes into that. I mentioned that upland loophole earlier, where if it's a citizens initiative tax increase, it doesn't need a 2/3 vote. The Constitution doesn't apply, really. And so they're saying they pass with a 50% plus 1 vote. If it's a citizens initiative, we take issue with that. We would have closed that loophole with the Taxpayer Protection Act, which was supposed to be on the November ballot. It qualified, but the governor of California sued to have it taken off the ballot.
Mhm.
He sued us to have it taken off the ballot. And the Secretary of State took it off the ballot. The Supreme Court of California said, yes, we're going to grant the governor's wish. I don't want to say the governor was right because the arguments were stupid, but they granted the governor's wish. By the way, just at the moment that everyone was working on the budget for the judiciary and how much money they would have for their operations and their salary increases. What a coincidence. And so they granted the governor's wish and they took it off the ballot. And now if we want to close that loophole, we have to go back and collect signatures again for 2026. We're not happy about that. That's the lay of the land. Did I answer the question or did I wander off on a tangent?
I'll go on to the next question. Did you say yes on Prop 35?
We're not taking a position at Howard Jarvis on Prop 35, but I would say that yes is a reasonable vote. If they're going to keep this tax, it's better to direct it to the Medi-Cal providers than to put it in the general fund.
Okay. Can you explain again why Prop 34 is a yes per Howard Jarvis?
Excuse me, Prop 34 puts a stop to nonprofit organizations taking the money that they earn from government programs and spending it on politics. Now, these are nonprofit organizations. The rules for spending money in politics are pretty strict. And what the AIDS Healthcare Foundation has been doing is profiting on a federal drug discount program in their healthcare programs that they run, because it's the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And they take these millions and millions of dollars and they've been directing it into trying to pass radical rent control. And so the landlords put this on the ballot to put a stop to that. And what it says is that a nonprofit organization that meets these certain income and size requirements, it's not all nonprofit organizations, if they're making money in the federal drug discount program, they must spend it on their core mission of healthcare. They can't spend it on something unrelated, like campaigning for rent control for the third time since 2018. So that's what it does. Now, rent control is very, very damaging. It reduces the supply of housing. It drives people out of the rental housing business. It's very damaging to the housing supply and to the tenants who rely on these units. And so for that reason, Howard Jarvis supports Prop 34 to put a stop to something that we think is an abuse. So that's why, yes, on 34.
Okay. This one is Prop 5 comes to us courtesy of the Democrat-controlled state legislature. This is why all elections matter and why it is so critical that Republicans win the seats necessary to break the Democrat supermajority.
Amen.
Will HJTA be highlighting the exact state legislators who voted for putting Prop 5 on the ballot in the first place?
Oh, we already did. Go to hjta.org and click the menu, and under legislation, you'll see legislative report cards. Last December's legislative report card was entirely about this measure and one other. This one makes it easier to raise taxes, and the other one makes it harder to do anything about it. Without going into the details, the whole legislative report card was just their votes on those two measures. Some people got A's. They voted with taxpayers. Lots of people got F's. I told them to use color ink. I wanted the people who voted to destroy Prop 13 to get like a putrid cadaver green color around their names. So we had like sunshine on the people who voted right and cadaver green on the people who voted wrong, indicating that we are coming for them. And we have a PAC. If you'd like to donate to it, the Howard Jarvis State PAC donates to candidates who are favorable on taxpayer issues. And we also have our Protect Prop 13 committee, which is doing the campaign against Prop 5. As you know, California has very specific rules about raising money for campaigns. And so we have a state PAC for candidates. We have the Protect Prop 13 committee for ballot measures. We have the foundation, which pays for our legal work, and those are tax deductible when you donate to that, or maybe, depending on your situation. And then we have the association, which does all the other work, the lobbying, the media, the rest of it. So we are actively fighting for taxpayers everywhere. The courts, the legislature, the ballot. If you're not already a member of the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, why not? Join us. It's only $15 a year. You strengthen the voice of taxpayers in California. You'll be informed on all this stuff before it happens, and it's too late to do anything about it. Come on board and join HJTA and encourage your friends to join HJTA. I'd like to grow the organization to 1 million members. We're not close to that now, but I think we should have 1 million members, and then we will be extremely powerful in California politics.
Yeah, that's great. So to end this question, the comment was voters need to know which legislators have thrown the property owners of California under the bus. So, yeah,
Yes,
okay.
yes.
So let's-
Legislative report cards on the Howard Jarvis website, and we'll have another legislative report card coming out in December in the issue of Taxing Times, which is our newsletter, a little newspaper that I write and edit, and you'll see the legislative report card for this current session in the December issue.
Okay, so this question, I guess it's regarding Proposition 3. Does the U.S. Constitution, excuse me, now just refer to right to marry, or does it include man and woman and two people of the same sex? If it does, the California Constitution will not have the same verbiage. Will only include right to marry and keep the verbiage in the California Constitution, right to pursue and obtain happiness.
I'm not really sure. The right to marry, essentially we're talking about same-sex marriage being legal in every state, and the Supreme Court said that. So whatever language they used in that decision, and the name, is it Obergefell? Is that the case that did, I can't remember. But what the Supreme Court said is the law of the land in every state. And California has this language left over from Prop 8, I think it was a few years back, that said marriage is between a man and a woman. And it's non-functional language because of what the Supreme Court did later. So this takes it out. I think it was put into a proposition this year to try and embarrass the Trump campaign in some way, to try and raise the issue, because they like to say that Republicans hate people. You know, they like to campaign on, the Democrats like to campaign on things like that, social issues. So they don't have to talk about their economic policy failures and their foreign policy failures and the fact that they want to end free speech in America. They don't want to talk about that. I'll talk about that.
Someone, I don't know if this is a comment, clarification. If the U.S. Constitution includes man and women and two people of the same sex, then the California Constitution is different from the UD Constitution and can open a can of worms.
Well, it isn't a can of worms. According to the legislative analysts team, it makes no difference whether we change this or not, because it's the Supreme Court's ruling that controls. And it's not in the language of the Constitution of the United States. There was no constitutional amendment about marriage. This is a Supreme Court interpretation, which is how a lot of things have been changed in the Constitution, through Supreme Court interpretation.
Okay. This person, when we lived in San Mateo, we had Proposition 13 that when we moved to Chico, they said it was not transferable to Butte County. Is there a way to access that proposition again?
When you sell your property and you buy another property, the new property is reassessed. You buy the new property at market value, and your tax base is set when you buy it from the purchase price. That becomes your new base year assessed value, from which it can only increase 2% a year. There was before Prop 19, we had Proposition 60 and Proposition 90. And 60 said that people who were seniors could move to another home in the same county that was the same or lesser value and transfer the tax base from the first house to the second house within the same county. Proposition 90 said that you could transfer it to other counties if they chose to accept the transfers, but only about 10 of them did. So 48 counties didn't. So unfortunately, you were not able to transfer your tax base to the new home. So when you bought a new home, your tax base was set at that purchase price. Prop 19, the good part of Prop 19, said that you can transfer to any county, but it's not retroactive. So I'm sorry about that.
Yeah. Okay. Does Prop 3 open a door to polygamy?
Some conservatives think so. The legislative analyst does not think so. I don't know.
Okay. I don't see any more in the chat. Oh, wait a minute, one more. Prop 35, clarification on HJTA official position. Is it no position or yes?
We have taken, we've taken neither position on Prop 35, no
Okay.
position at all.
Okay. Okay. Someone said, thank you, Susan. Love your columns in the Register.
Thank you. Appreciate
And-
that.
and several thank yous.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? We have about 5 more minutes of time. I don't see any in the chat. Wait a minute. Okay. That was so informative. Your presentations are very much appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah. All right. Well.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Someone's joining tonight.
Well, good. Welcome.
And yeah, very important information that you've shared with us tonight. And we really appreciate your time. And we're just ready to go out there and educate everyone.
Excellent.
And,
Thank
that's
you.
it. And members, thank you so much for attending tonight. Appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good night,
evening,
everybody.
everyone. Good
Good night.
night.